Good morning. My name is Brendan Burke. I'm here as the translator of the recently published book by the Spanish philosopher Gustavo Bueno entitled The Happiness Delusion, with the subtitle Debunking the Myth of Happiness. The purpose of this video is to speak a little bit about the book itself, the translation, some of the issues that were involved with it. But before getting into it, I'd like to give just a brief introduction to Gustavo Bueno, to his life, his work, as he's not a particularly well-known philosopher outside of the Spanish-speaking world. He was born in 1924, recently passed away in 2016. Spent the majority of his career here at the University in Oviedo and at the foundation from which we're making this video that bears his name. He was a highly prolific writer who began publishing in about the 1970s and up until the very end of his life continued publishing articles, newspaper interviews, books, across a wide variety of media. He also made innovative use of video around the time where video became a platform for communication. So his video lectures have been seen millions of times on the whole. He's probably best known as the creator of and main exponent of a system of philosophy called philosophical materialism. It's a materialist philosophy that posits the interplay of three different genres of matter within reality. This system of philosophy has had a profound effect on thinkers here in Spain and Latin America. Probably about across three generations of thinkers who after Bueno have developed and applied the system to a wide variety of fields: physics, mathematics, biology, history, religion. The list goes on and on and on. But as I said before, he's not particularly well known outside of Spain, or outside of Latin America, outside of Spanish-speaking countries, probably due to the fact that he never wrote in English. Very little of his work was translated into English, and those initial followers of his didn't publish much in English. Recently, work has begun to be published and translated into English, this book obviously being a part of this campaign to kind of bring some of his works to an English-speaking audience. There have been some translations of his made into German, into Chinese. Like I said, we've done some work into English, smaller treatises of his on the philosophy of science entitled Sciences as Categorical Closures. But again, these works are sparse compared to his general body of work, and this book, this translation here, marks kind of an attempt to bring this work to a greater audience, to an English-speaking audience, and to put it into conversation with philosophy outside of Spain and Latin America. So which brings us to this book, The Happiness Delusion. It was originally published in 2005. It falls within a series of other books dealing with myths, trying to shed light on issues that are at play in present-day society that are perhaps filled with problems that aren't necessarily addressed properly. So for example, we're dealing here with happiness. Other books he deals with culture, the political left, the political right. In another book he deals with Spain is not a myth. He tries to take the opposite approach. But in this book, the approach that he takes is to give a sort of introduction to philosophical materialism, to the tools that it uses to analyze the issues under its examination, in this case in happiness. So he starts out by laying out the problem of happiness, the issues that are involved with it. He moves on to delineate what he calls the field of happiness, then concepts of happiness, ideas of happiness, theories of happiness, doctrines of happiness, all of which are at play when we're talking about happiness. Then he moves on and uses this criteria to establish a 12-fold classification of different models of happiness, all of which are incompatible within one another. After that, he picks up the pieces from this demolition that he makes to advance philosophical materialism's viewpoint on the issue. His thesis in this regard is that we can't talk about happiness in general as a single idea. It is, insofar as that it's related very closely to the idea of man's destiny, that happiness is every man's destiny. Everybody's seeking happiness. Rather, what we should be doing is talking about plural happinesses, which must be attached to concrete contents that must be specified every time we're talking about a specific form of happiness. So this is kind of the approach that he takes in this book in laying his critical eye on happiness. The translation itself is a difficult translation, probably for about three main reasons. Bueno's a very erudite scholar, well-versed in a wide variety of subjects, from classical Greek and Latin, mathematics, physics, biology. The list goes on and on and on. For a translator who lacks the finesse that Bueno has in these subjects, to come to a thoughtful, an accurate, and a faithful translation requires significant research into these issues. So this is one difficulty. The other difficulty is the fact that Bueno expresses himself in a very idiosyncratic manner. In this regard, both myself and the reviewers have taken pains to try and distill the language that he uses to bring out the arguments that he's making, to explain better some of the points that he's trying to put across, to make it a little bit more palpable to an English-speaking audience. The way that Bueno flows in his style isn't necessarily conducive to easy understanding, translated literally into English. So the pains that we've taken is to try and distill this language to make it a little bit more straightforward, and a little bit more direct, and thus a little bit more palpable for an English-speaking audience. I think the third difficulty in translation is, as I said before, Bueno, his system of philosophy, philosophical materialism, employs a wide variety of terms specific to the system itself. In fact, there's a dictionary devoted just to terms used in philosophical materialism. So to come to a translation of these terms requires careful thought, taking into account the specific use that these terms have in philosophical materialism. In this regard, the revisers of this book, Lino Camproví and Javier Pérez Jara, have proven invaluable to provide contributions as far as references and as far as explanations are concerned. In certain parts of the book, it seems that Bueno perhaps glosses over, takes for granted some ideas that his audience might have, probably for the simple fact that he's so well known within Spain and Latin America. But again, for an English-speaking audience, these concepts probably need further explanation to give some context and background to what Bueno is trying to get at here. And again, the work by the revisers in this regard has proven invaluable and absolutely necessary to gain a greater understanding of the book. So I think the purpose of this translation, what we're trying to do with it, is to put forward, and past translations itself, is to put forward a body of work in English against which further translations can judge themselves and to make their own decisions, to put forward their own proposals. Bueno always has said that thinking is thinking against someone else. And in this regard, the translations play a similar role, that this is by no means an authoritative translation of one of Bueno's works, or even the terms involved in his system of philosophy, but rather it's a proposal for future translations to look at, to think against, to critique, to enter into a sort of conversation or a dialectic to make the decisions that they will make in the future based on more rational decisions. Perhaps in this book we've made some mistakes. Perhaps there's not the most rational foundation in certain translations. I'd like to think there is. But again, arguments can be made against it. And I think the whole purpose of this translation is to put forward a proposal against which arguments can be made or support can be lent to the decisions that we've made for it. We hope you find the book interesting. And again, it's available on Amazon worldwide, and as well in the paper format at the publisher's website, Pentalfa Ediciones. So thank you very much. Have a nice day.